in the deep dive tonight, politics. Now, after the election of Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and of course Elon Musk, it seemed, uh, people on the left, voters on the left, seem to be like in a malaise. They just tired. They literally throw up their hands and feel like they have no recourse. In fact, it could arguably be said that there is no recourse. Um, Voters gave Donald Trump and Vance and Trump the entire key to Washington and to the entire country. They gave him the presidency, they gave them the Senate, and they gave them the House. So there's precious little they could blame the Democrats for not doing, because Democrats don't have any power in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump literally said he was going to do the things he was going to do, and he set about to start doing them. So technically, the idea that anyone would start blaming or start expecting the Democrats to do anything other than maybe get out and march with the people who are disenchanted with what's going on. There's precious little that Democrats can do. They have no power, they hold no power. And in most cases, anything that they're going to do can be overridden by the president. And as you may have noticed, many of you may have noticed, a lot of what the president is doing, he's not doing through the Congress. He's not passing laws. It's executive action. So again, what are the Democrats to do? There's not much you can do about executive action but challenge them in court. That's about it. Well, of course, Massachusetts U.S. Senator Ed Markey, he had a couple of things to say about that today. So we let Senator Markey speak for himself, though.
Constitutional law, the very first day, they explained to you that the federal courts determine what is constitutional, not the Congress, not the president. Now, the president this week and Elon Musk and J.D. Vance, they're very unhappy that that's the way our founding fathers constructed the Constitution. Agreed. And so on birthright citizenship, they've now been blocked. On freezing all federal funds, they've now been blocked. On cutting NIH funding, they've been blocked. On getting into all of the information about every American at the Department of Treasury, violating privacy rights of all Americans, they've been blocked. So they're very unhappy. But they're unhappy because they don't like the Constitution. They don't like the checks and balances. They don't like the system that was constructed to make sure that we did not have a king. We did not have a dictator. But we had, in fact, a system that ensured that all of these constitutional rights would be protected. And so right now, they're stymied for the time being, but ultimately, we know what the plot is. The plot is to get into Medicare, to get into Medicaid, to get into all of the Department of Education funding programs, to get into clean air, to get into clean water. And why? To find the hundreds of billions of dollars in order to have the tax breaks for the millionaires and billionaires. So they're right now frustrated by the courts. But we're saying, no, there are safeguards. There are procedures. There are laws on the books that have been passed by Congress and signed by presidents that block you from doing this, Mr. President. And they're very unhappy, but they're only unhappy because the United States Constitution is blocking them from doing what is illegal and unconstitutional.
And that is true. The fact is, Donald Trump, though, said what he was going to do. And for the life of me, I could not understand, and I still can't understand, why is it that poor white people in particular continue to vote against their own self-interest? Who do you think is going to be affected by this? Now, for the immigrants that Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and others have demonized, immigrants that they've demonized, after they deport who they can deport, and I don't think Donald Trump is going to deport more people than Barack Obama did when all of the dust is settled. He may very well do it, he may not. Because Barack Obama thus far deported more people out of the United States than any president in modern history. So I am not sure that Donald Trump, with all of the hatred and the vitriol and the propaganda, I don't know whether or not he's going to be able to do what deport as many people as he says he's going to do. So but when he's finished, don't you think, who do you think he's going to turn on next? He's going to turn on the poorest of the poor. He's going to cut your programs like Senator Markey's talking about, because they're already talking about ignoring the courts. and he said he's going to be a dictator from day one. He's going to ignore court orders. And let's just say Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Elon Musk decide to ignore the courts and go about doing what they said they're going to do. Who is going to stop him? Who is going to stop him? Because the courts can issue an order, and like Andrew Jackson said, let the court enforce its order, because the court does not have a military. It does not have a police force to enforce its orders. This system was built on checks and balances. It was built on good faith that people in positions of power were going to respect the Constitution, were going to abide by the laws. But in the event a president steps forward and says, I'm not going to follow the law, I'm not listening to court, I'm going to do what I am an elected president, I'm going to do what I want to do, there's no one who is going to stop him. No one is going to stop them. All right? They are able to do what they want. They are able to do what they want. So let's simply not reflect on the events of the past month, but speak to the profound sense of unease, exhaustion, and resignation that has settled over so many Americans. The election of Trump, his return to power, has not just reignited old divisions, but has deepened the disillusionment of a people who have seen their democratic institutions tested, their rights threatened, and their futures placed in abject jeopardy. In the weeks and months since Donald Trump inauguration, the administration led by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Elon Musk, the unelected super billionaire who got them elected, has launched an aggressive assault on the fundamental structures of the American government. They have sought to reshape the nation through executive action, circumventing democratic norms and pushing an agenda that prioritizes power over principle, loyalty over law. Take, for instance, their attempt to access sensitive Treasury Department data, an effort that would have handed the White House vast unchecked oversight over financial records. This may yet happen. This was not merely a bureaucratic maneuver. It was an attempt to turn the mechanisms of government into a tool for political retribution, for control, for silencing opposition. Had the courts not intervened, how long would it have been before political enemies, journalists, or even ordinary citizens found themselves under the microscope of an administration that thrives on vengeance? And then there is the attack on birthright citizenship, a foundational principle of the American promise. This administration has sought to undo the very idea that being born on this soil makes you an American. They have tried to undermine the 14th Amendment itself, a move that would create a permanent underclass, delegitimizing generations of immigrants and their children. That's what they want to do. This is not just an attack on policy, it is an attack on the soul of a nation that has long prided itself on being a land of opportunity. Once again, the courts have stepped in, but the mere fact that this administration is willing to challenge something so fundamental should shake us all. Then there is the wholesale freezing of federal funds, a chaotic and indiscriminate decision that left vital programs in limbo. Funding for infrastructure, disaster relief, even basic social services was halted in an unprecedented move of executive overreach. It was an attempt to consolidate power to hold the government itself hostage. The consequences were felt across the country, from struggling towns to major cities, from hospitals to schools. And let us not forget their push to cut funding for the National Institute of Health, a direct attack on medical research, on science, on the very institutions that have saved lives for decades. This is an administration that thrives on chaos, that wages war on expertise, that sees knowledge not as a tool for progress, but as a threat to its control. The courts have blocked these cuts for now, but the very fact that we must rely on legal battles to protect something as essential as medical research speaks to the fragility of this moment. And so we find ourselves here at a crossroads where the only thing holding the line is the resilience of the judiciary thus far, the protests of the people, and the last gasp of institutional resistance. But how long can that last? How many times can we count on the courts to intervene before they too are reshaping Trump's image? How many battles can ordinary citizens fight before exhaustion takes hold? This is the great malaise that has settled over America. It is not just fear, it is weariness. It is the sense that no matter how many times the people reject this vision of governance, it finds its way back. That no matter how many protests erupts, how many lawsuits are won, the battle is never truly over. We have been here before, we fought, we resisted, and yet again, here we are again. Here we are again. But if history teaches us anything, it is that resignation is not an option. Fatigue is the weapon of those who seek to erode democracy, and empathy is their greatest ally. Apathy, I'm sorry. We cannot allow this moment to become the new normal. We cannot accept that our rights, our institutions, our futures are perpetually at risk. So I ask, what will we do? Will we give in to this exhaustion, or will we find within ourselves the strength to fight once more? Will we allow despair to consume us, or will we remember that democracy is not a spectator sport? This is our test, not just of policy or politics, but of endurance, of commitment, of belief in the idea that this country still belongs to the American people. We have seen what happens when we assume democracy will defend itself. We have seen what happens when we allow exhaustion to turn into silence. We must not let it happen again. Thank you. This was the deep dive. Have a good night.